My name's Robin Lobb, and I'm with Zeros and Ones Incorporated, or Zoink. And just introducing myself again, we just spoke to you, of course, at the board game workshop for today, and now we're in the role-playing game workshop, which Mike Lobb will be the game master, running through some workshopping of how do you invent some game mechanics to explore real world stories of espionage and special forces. And when you do that with real stories, does it make for an improved educational experience for the students who are students of applied intelligence? So today, we're again looking at three modalities: board games, role-playing games, and computer games. And this is the role-playing games section or workshop. And I'm going to introduce a few people who know a bit about role-playing. And I'll start with Mike Lobb. Mike, if you would come up here and just say a few words about what we can do to learn today.
So I've already had the opportunity to introduce with the people around the table here, but for the sake of the folks who are online, we are doing 3 sessions really. We're looking at a session of character creation and orientation to the scenario itself. We're then going to follow up with a more tactical approach to how to escape from the center of Moscow, which reflects the experience of our real story that we're basing the scenario on. And then the third session is going to take us to a higher level and look at the choices of the strategic heads of agencies around the world and how that had an effect perhaps on the reception of a spy in a like-minded circumstance to this scenario.
And I'm going to invite Adam and Janusz as well to say a few words. I'll start with Adam just to introduce, one of the key things we're looking at today is the launching of Real Spy Comics over the last year and coming into the year ahead, and that exploring what is such a unique product. It gives so much opportunity, certainly in the realm of intelligence education, for students to be comparing whatever degree studies they're doing. They can compare it now to authentic real life stories, and it just makes it so much more meaningful. So we're grateful that you and Jan have created this, and we're just excited to have you here so that we can try playtesting what could we do with role playing and these real spy stories. So Adam, please say a few words.
Well, it's great to meet everybody, and hopefully today will be both a bit of fun, but also constructive in working out how we can take from our perspective a basis of stories that are either truly real or based in reality. And I'll just talk a little bit about that process in a second. But to turn it into a format that is not only accessible to people, but which enables some creative thinking in a way that, critical thinking in a way that is both, enables creativity, but which is grounded in the sorts of lessons that the intelligence community is trying to instill in people as you sort of develop through your careers, both from at an entry level and then a professional development level. Real Spy Comics, we'll throw to Jan in a little bit about him and how this story originated, but it comes from a place where me as a person who's worked in the shadows pretty much my whole career, getting exposed to the US system where things are a little bit more open. If you worked in the CIA, for the most part, you're allowed to say you worked in the CIA. For my service, I'm not allowed to by law. And that means that understanding what happens in the intelligence community, especially in the human intelligence part of the intelligence community and the counterintelligence part of the intelligence community is really misunderstood or has been guided by things like, James Bond and Jason Bourne and sort of flights of fancy that have only a passing resemblance to the real work. And so when Jan and I met and started talking about his experience in creating Almost American, not only that, but his fascinating life. We decided together that collecting these stories and going through a process where we retain the trust of the intelligence communities, primarily of the Five Eyes, but also beyond, where we go through an appropriate clearance process, where we actually are working as an osmosis filter, I guess, for the intelligence community to tell some of their stories and to put it into a format which does make it a little more accessible. We'd be doing a community service. We'll be helping demystify the intelligence community to help people understand that there are people like me with dad bods and other people out there that are doing some amazing things on a daily basis, putting themselves in jeopardy, in harm's way, for not very much money, and for a great love of the country that they come from and the system in which they are, which in whether it's a democracy or something else, people do this generally through a feeling of service and patriotism, and they're kind of, we think, are noble sentiments, ones that we want to tell. We want people to be curious about the intelligence community, to sort of think about some of the hard things that the intelligence community makes you do from a moral perspective, but also from a risk-taking and risk-making, decision-making process, and let people have a bit more understanding about the community. So, and if on top of that, it entertains people, and people have some fun along the way, because ultimately it's not just all, hard work and sticky taping receipts onto pieces of paper. It's actually sometimes a lot of fun. I think it's to everyone's benefit. So thanks, Robin. Really pleased to be part of this, and hopefully as we go through the role-playing scenario, Jan and I can bring some kind of realism to, the story and people's experience.
Thanks, Adam. I'm actually going to invite, this is a bit off the cuff, but invite just a couple of interesting folks to say a few words. Tom Van Hare, do you want to say a couple words about what you think might happen with exploring through role-playing here today and with real stories?
Well, I think that it's a very interesting thing, and it's one of the areas in the PME, professional military education work, that I've been working on right now, is how to take what is really a kind of a generic unit and individual's concept and bring it into a more narrative style war game, but not on rails, so that the players, and really I'm specializing in solitaire war games. And so role playing in solitaire, in a solitaire environment, is often considered impossible. But in recent days, in recent months, I've developed a way to create a role playing experience in a solitaire environment that creates a multiplayer sense in a military thing. For Adam Leslie, what occurred to me is that one of the topics that he should consider for his comic book based educational tools would be the story of an old alumni of my old program at Michigan State University, which is a guy by the name of Burton Gerber. And Burton Gerber was the handler at the CIA for Adolf Tolkachev, the billion-dollar spy.
Yeah.
And he wrote a classified, it's still classified memoir, but you should probably be able to get access to it, called Splendid Day, The Case Officer's Journey. And this is actually still in use 40 plus 50 years, almost 50 years later. It talks about operational methods for Moscow and what works, and a lot of lessons. And that would be an ideal topic for a comic-based educational tool. But one of the things, most recent game that I've developed that has been published is designed to teach about drone conflict, drone warfare. It's based in the Ukraine war, and it's called Game of Drones. And we're doing a PME-based scenario of it. And it is narrative, it is role-playing, it is a board game, and it is a multiplayer game. And I have published that. It's available on Amazon in book form. There's also box sets available through Blue Panther. They're very popular right now, and it teaches the hard lessons about today's drone conflicts, how we're using FPV drones and drone bombers.
Yeah.
So this is something that's very important. Most of the war games today do not have very much in the way of background about what the actual experience is. And this is my specialty, is that the war game is a teaching tool. So half of the book is about the history and what's happening and the lessons to learn, and the other half is the war game that they're designed to work together. So one supports the other.
Sounds interesting the way it sort of connects to Adam Leslie's, the graphic novel, and what can we do
Yeah.
to pull it apart by using role playing and so forth. And I'm gonna ask,
Increasingly, I'm going to say one last thing. Increasingly,
sure.
seeing a direct connection between intelligence analysis and operations and direct kinetic operations. So there isn't, we're seeing in modern warfare, we're not seeing this old intelligence officer does his thing, the warfighter does his thing, the warfighter reads the reports. We're seeing a very tight lash up that is in real time with hour by hour updates, and it's really affecting the lethality on the front. So thank you.
And thank you very much, Thomas. And that relates to the drone game that you were mentioning, which it makes me think of one of the concerns we've been talking about in the Washington area is the disaggregated swarm dynamic. And certainly that relates to AI use in management of drones in the field. I'm going to ask, and this is maybe out of the blue, but Bob Stratton to say whatever comes to his mind, because he's one of the most unusual folks in this community, and I'm delighted that he was able to come here today. Bob?
That's one word for it. Thanks, Robin. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and I can already tell you've assembled a fascinating group of folks just from what I've already heard. I guess I started out as a technologist. I was a little ARPANET rat when I was too young to really when I wasn't supposed to be there, and was, I guess, a hacker before we called it that much, and before it was cool. Turned toward the light pretty early on, and wound up starting a security organization at what became the largest of the very first commercial internet providers. So I was on the phone with international law enforcement pretty much every day for one country or another. I've been lied to by every telephone company in the world pretty much when they claim they're going to get something done on time. I used to write software for a living. I've been a part of a number of foundational cybersecurity technologies, like the very first device that did packet encryption at T1 speeds, and a couple of other categories. But I had a boutique consultancy because I'd been in a big ISP, a global ISP, I was ruined for anything smaller than multinational environments. So I started a boutique in the 90s doing penetration testing and incident response. And our customer base, basically, if you weren't in more than one country or what we now call a critical infrastructure, I kind of didn't want your business. So I did a lot of, figuratively speaking, parachuting in to handle incidents before a lot of the processes were really kind of commoditized and hammered out. I've also, got to break into a lot of things all over the world at the request of the owners of them. But I sold that company, and around that time, I realized I like building business as much as I like technology. And a friend of mine was at this weird little experience to do something kind of like a venture capital fund for the United States intelligence community called InQtel. And I wound up joining it when it was like, I guess, about 25 of us, and wound up being the guy that looked at every new technology that came in the door. So I read 600 business plans in the first 9 months of 2001, for example. And then because of other avocational interests I've had ever since childhood that involved things like chemistry and electronics and RF radio and things, I wound up, it turned out we thought that almost all of our work would be security and software. It turned out the customer, and at the time it was one agency in Langley, was pretty good at that. So I stood up the whole non-information technology practice, which was novel power sources, batteries, distributed sensor networks, RF micro devices, and anything that was chemical, biological, radiological, or explosive. It was some of the most rewarding work I've ever done in my life. I remember, we spent a lot of time looking at gaming and simulation. In fact, I think at one point we bought 200 PlayStations. And I got to do things like run focus groups with analysts about what was hard about their job. I also got to talk to people more on the operational side about interesting things, technologies that I found that may or may not be of any use to them. And a lot of what we had to do was encourage people to use imagination. It's funny that there were these mindsets, and people are stuck in these mindsets like our problems are magic special government problems. One of the smartest things they ever did was they created this unclassified set of hard problems, and they canvassed all of the directorates, not just not just operations or analysis, but administration, people who do expense reports. And we were pretty tightly coupled already with scientific technology. And I remember looking at these problems and, the problems, the way I describe it is like, how do I make it not matter that Robin left his laptop in the backseat of a taxi cab in Islamabad? I would argue everybody has a variant of that problem. That is not a magic special government problem. So a lot of what we had to do was be disruptive in a constructive way. And I discovered that even word choice made a huge difference in the ability of people to accept things that we were doing. And we discovered things. I was looking at a hard problem of streaming high resolution imagery over low speed connections to cheap computers. And this is at a time where if you were in the field and you wanted maps, you had to go to the guy who printed them out on a big plotter for you. And we found a startup that was showing neighborhoods for real estate agents from above. And we invested in that very early on. And that little company, which had called itself Keyhole, much to the consternation of some of the customers, wound up being acquired by Google and became Google Earth. And that team is now doing Pokemon Go and the Harry Potter game. So I think when I've heard about some of what Robin's trying to do here, and because I've seen what's hard about some of these jobs and have tried to find ways to make the lives easier of folks in a lot of these roles, not necessarily even everybody thinks about the operations people and the analysis people, but how many people think about the administration people? And it's a significant concern if we can't find ways to make this interesting and compelling. Even though you can't talk about a lot, we're going to have a huge fundamental problem. So I'm pretty passionate about this challenge of finding ways to help folks understand whether they're curious and pursue that curiosity, and then maybe pursue a career.
Thanks, Bob. That's brilliant, and you certainly have a unique perspective on this. I'm going to ask a student to say a couple words as well about what they think will be interesting about role playing, and to what extent they've seen role playing rolled out in any of their education. Keegan, could you say a couple words?
Yeah, so my name is Keegan Christensen. I'm a student at Indiana University. Wargaming has been very interesting. Growing up, I was quite the military nerd. That was what I was all about. And I, you know, had a lot of online friends, and we were building war games before it was even, yeah, I didn't know you could make a job out of it. I didn't know that was what was going on. So I very passionate about wargaming, and it seems that you guys just are so brilliant at it, and it's very nice to meet all of you.
Thanks, Keegan. I know what we're focused on here now is in this workshop is role-playing games, real stories that happen to be coming to us from Real Spy Comics. And so what Bob said, what Thomas has said, and what Keegan has said gives us a bit of flavor and context. I have a friend here today as well, Kevin Holbeach, he's been sick for the last week, so I don't know that he wants to say hello, but I will say it's been great having him a part of this process as we've been putting together the workshop, because he's, I was referred to him as a top IP lawyer in the country in the game space specifically, and looks like he might be able to say hello. If he could say just a word or two about Real Spy Comics and the role-playing workshop that we're in right now. I don't know if you have any thoughts, but please share, Kevin.
Yeah, I'm happy to join by Zoom. I'm really devastated I'm not able to be there. I think I could attend, but I think I'd still potentially, infect the people who are there. But yeah, I'm really excited about this opportunity to work with Real Spy Comics on this. I think that what we have, with the wealth of stories that they may have access to, is an opportunity to take what is oftentimes a really romanticized, that Jason Bourne type way of role playing a real spy story, and instead to make it, I think, perhaps more realistic and perhaps more useful for for everyone. And what's more, I think the making it more realistic as well will likely have an appeal to those who, only really dip their toe in this space more on the entertainment side of things as well. So I think I see a potential for a mass appeal by virtue of some of the pedigree that Real Spy Comics brings to it. So anyway, thanks again for involving me in this, and it's been a real pleasure.
Thanks, Kevin. Going to also give a thank you to Mike, who's the game master for this, because he comes in just about exclusively having run Dungeons and Dragons related, and that gave us a really good sort of control subject to look at what happens when you want to build a game system or explore one, and look at these stories. So he got to look at sort of the raw data, the actual graphic novel. Then he got to talk to Adam. Then he got to talk to the actual subject matter expert, Jan Newman. And so I'm going to have Jan say a few words in a minute. What's interesting about his story is that, the hero in this story has a pedigree of values that are deeply ingrained, and he decides to act on that at a huge risk, huge cost beyond the risk. And he's also helping us today by letting us have that story, and he's going to help us as we explore it in the workshop. So that's amazing that he's going to be here as we go through, as Mike was saying earlier, 3 levels of gameplay on 3 specific scenarios. So Jan, if you're available now, could you tell us just a bit about what this means to you, that we're going to be exploring role-playing and how that can contribute to what Real Spy Comics means, and what does it mean from the point of view of yourself and your life story?
Well, for my life story, I'm not sure how it's going to impact my life in this case, but definitely it's going to help our company to grow and get some data and understanding of what people are looking for. Also, most important part is experts' opinion, because you guys, it's the best of the best. So that's extremely valuable for us. As for the game itself, the last time I played such game, and I was breaking the stories into the pieces, when I was 17 years old, I was part of the KGB High School, which is FSB Academy, and it was pretty much based on a black and white training video from the 70s, guys with the bad suits and bad haircuts. But it was still interesting and intriguing. I'm not sure... Robin, do you need me to kind of introduce myself and give some brief about my background, or I guess everyone already knows the backstory? What's the plan?
So you're saying, pardon me, I'll ask you that.
Do you need me to introduce myself in some details, or kind of it's already known?
Well, part of what's going to happen with you introducing will be in the session 0 that Mike's going to do after the end of this live Zoom session. So you saying hello now is just introducing the Zoom audience, and then we'll get into some of the nitty gritty after. Sorry, I just had to collect one.
No worries. So I'm excited to be here. I'm curious what will be the feedback. I'm curious about the process. It's a learning for us as a company and as a team as well. So that's interesting. We do have a plan. We've been developing some ideas how we can bring our stories into the role-playing and educational material for intelligence studies. We did some few light tests on some cases, but we never done anything like that. So that's the first time for us. But again, overall, really excited, looking forward, and want to learn new things. So we'll see how it's gonna work out. And I'm curious how you guys are gonna pretty much break into the pieces my story, at least small piece of it. This escape thing from Moscow. Looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. All right. Thanks, Jan. Thank you for joining.